We are back with another lecture, and in today's class, I'm going to teach you guys about the remaining cells that we have got in the kingdoms, like the organisms that we have in the kingdom. So we can never forget about these bacterial cells. Now, before I go with the bacterial cell, I told you guys that when the classification we were doing for the organisms, so we started to be putting the organisms into two distinct categories. On one side, the organisms, they were the eukaryotes, and then on the other way around, they were the prokaryotes. And I told you that in your higher classes, there are gonna be multiple differences between the eukaryotes that we have and the prokaryotes that we have. But for the time being, you just know as that the eukaryotes are gonna have the nucleus in them, and the prokaryotes are gonna lack the nucleus in them. Like there would be the genetic material, but it would not be enclosed by the nucleus. In the eukaryotes, we had four kingdoms, and among the four kingdoms, I said that we are gonna be having the animalia, then there are gonna be the funguses, the plantae, at the end we are gonna have the protoctist. And in the prokaryotes, we have got just one kingdom, and that are the bacteria. And we have to see that how these bacteria they look like. So before we proceed, here you need to be knowing is that the bacterial cells, they're gonna have the cell wall in them, okay? And they would have the cell membrane in them. They would be the ribosomes. Now, earlier in the animal and the plant cell, the ribosomes that we come across, so they are the ATS ribosomes. Now, you would learn about them in your higher classes that the ribosomes are further split into two types on the basis of their size. The ATS are the bigger and the 70S are the smaller ribosomal subunits. So the bacteria, they have got these small ribosomal subunit. Then they would have the extra genetic material, and that would be the plasmid. Why I'm saying extra genetic material? Because we are going to learn that the bacteria they have got their circular DNA, but some, not all, but some of the bacteria they would have this extra genetic material that is going to be contributing to the antibiotic resistance phenomenon that we will have a look in a while. And then some of the bacteria, again, not all, they have got this flagellum in them. Now, if you were to see this diagram, again, this is my handmade diagram. So here we have got this part that I'm highlighting here. So this is their cell wall. And unlike the plant cells and the funguses, they have the cell wall, but that composition is different. For the plant cell wall, it was a cellulose. For the funguses, it was chitin. But for the bacteria, the cell wall is going to be made up of another specialized kind of the molecule. And that specialized molecule is peptidoglycan. And the word peptidoglycan mean that in their cell wall, there is gonna be the protein part, and then there is gonna be the sugar part, so it becomes a peptidoglycan. And like us, they have got their cell membrane that would be regulating the movement of the substances inside and outside of these bacterial cells. And you see that these bacteria, they have in them this DNA, and this is a circular DNA. And I did not make or I did not enclose it within the nuclear envelope because this is a distinctive feature of the bacteria, distinct feature, special feature. They did not have gonna be having the nucleus, but rather than their DNA, it would be lying freely within the cytoplasm. Again, like us, the DNA in the bacteria is again, this is gonna be carrying the instructions for the protein synthesis because the bacteria are living. So for sure, they have to make the enzymes. They have to make some other proteins of their cell membranes. So that genetic information for the making of the protein is present within their circular DNA. Not all the bacteria, but some of the bacteria, they are mobile bacteria, like they have an ability to move. And when they have to move, so they would be having these structures in them, and these structures they are termed as the flagellum, and they allow the bacteria to be moving. Now, the situation that we have to consider is now in terms of this extra genetic material, like the original, the Gen 1 or the primary genetic material is their circular DNA, but extra genetic material in these bacteria cells is this plasmid that I have made it for you. So you see as that as far as the role of this plasmid is to be understanding for with us. So this would be carrying the information for the developing the antibiotic resistance. Now the scenario is that what do we mean by the antibiotic resistance? At some point or the other, you people may have got ill, and when you are getting ill, so the doctors they prescribe you a medicine, and that medicine is the antibiotic. The antibiotics that we use, they either have an ability to be killing the bacteria, or they either have an ability to be stopping the cell divisions in the bacteria. So you see that these bacteria, they are the living organisms, and they would want to live long. So this means that if they were to survive, then the antibiotic should not be able to kill them. So the situation this happens is that within their extra genetic material that I have got here, that I'm referring to this as a plasmid, so this has some genes, and these genes they are gonna be developing the antibiotic resistance in these bacteria. That means that if you're gonna eat the antibiotic drugs, so these bacteria would no longer be killed. Now, how this antibiotic resistance is gonna develop? So you just remember at the time and being as that it happens due to a phenomenon that we would look toward the end of this course, and we refer to this as the natural selection. So this natural selection allows them that they develop the antibiotic resistance so that the bacteria could no longer be killed by the antibiotic. And this is one of the very kind of a serious threat to the mankind, because there is gonna come a time when we would be having the antibiotics, but the bacteria would no longer be killed by them. So we are now looking on to some of the other alternatives so that we could be saved. Now here, moving onward, we have got another eukaryotic organism to be discussing, and this is fungus with us. Now, why I said that this is the eukaryotic organisms, because the thing is again very simple, that they're gonna have the nucleus in them, and that nucleus would be containing the genetic material. Now, overall, you remember as that among the component, they would have the cell wall, they're gonna have the cell membrane. Then another striking feature is that if they have to store the sugars in it or the glucose in it, so it could be stored in the form of the glycogen. And then again, like our cells, like the bacterial cells and the plant cells, they're gonna have the cytoplasm as well. So moving further with these funguses, as that these funguses, they are further subcategorized to being either the unicellular or they could be the multicellular. The unicellular meaning that the fungus would be comprising of just one cell. And when we have these multicellular funguses, so ultimately they would be multicellular. Okay, like the scenario here is, students, that the yeast is an example of the fungus which is unicellular, like it would be microscopic. And you may have gone to some restaurant where you may have eaten the mushrooms. So the mushrooms that we have, so they are the multicellular funguses. Now, earlier in the plants, we used the word autotrophic. That mean was that the plants are the autotrophic because they have an ability to making their own food. But when we intend to be discussing about the funguses, so they are heterotrophic, strictly heterotrophic. By the word strictly heterotrophic, what we mean is that they would never be able to be making their own food, but rather than they would be depending upon the other organisms for obtaining the nutrition out of them. And those of the funguses that would obtain the nutrition out of the dead organic matter, so they are termed as saprophytic in nature. What so happens is that if there was an organism that died, or in simple words, like in the kitchen, usually the mothers they keep some pieces of the bread in the refrigerator, and after some days you see that there is some kind of the mold that would grow on these pieces of the bread. So these are the funguses. Now, what the fungus is gonna do? That these funguses out of their body, and they're gonna release some enzymes out of them, and the enzymes which they are gonna release out of their body, so they are termed as extracellular enzymes. And when these extracellular enzymes they are secreted out of the fungus, so that are gonna break down these biological molecule into the simple ones, as in this case this was bread. So when it would be broken down, we would have the sugar. The fungus is gonna have the sugar, and then it would be utilizing it for its own metabolic processes. Now, if I were to show you the structure of the unicellular fungus, so here you see, guys, we have got the nucleus in them that would have the DNA in it. And here they have got their mitochondria, and that would be releasing the energy by the respiration. And again, like us, they have got these small spherical units, they are the ribosomes that would be making the proteins for these funguses. And on the outside, you see, like on the outside, that we have here the situation being drawn for you. So this is their cell wall, and the cell wall is not made up of cellulose, but rather than it is made up of chitin. So you see is, or you notice as that the plant cell wall was made up of the cellulose, the bacteria was made up of the peptidoglycan, but here for the fungus, this is made up of chitin. Okay. The other thing that I told you was that one of another feature with the bacteria is that whenever they have to be storing the food, so that would be in the form of the glycogen. Now, the funguses, they're gonna have a lot of glucose being absorbed into their cells, so they're gonna link the glucose molecules with one another. And when they would link these glucose molecules with one another, so they would make a complex sugar out of it. And that complex sugar that gets stored inside the funguses as, so we refer to this as the glycogen. Now, among The multicellular thing, as I have mentioned earlier, that they are the mushrooms. So they are not to be discussed much. You just have to be remembering the structure of this unicellular fungus, and this was yeast with us having the cell wall, the nucleus, the cell membrane, the ribosome, the cytoplasm, and the storage molecule, which was this glycogen with us. Now, last kingdom we have to be discussing. So they are the protoctists. Okay. And again, they are the eukaryotic organism. The eukaryotes mean again they have the DNA that would be enclosed in the nucleus. And the scientists they regard this kingdom as dustbin kingdom. Why they are regarding as a dustbin kingdom? Because in this kingdom we have got some organisms and they are not entirely exactly plants, but they have got some plant-like features in them. Like if I were to quote you an example of an algae, you may have seen that where the water stays or there is abundant supply of the water being available, usually near the taps where the water keeps on tapping again and again. So you may have seen over there some growth of these, a greenish kind of the growth. So they are the algae. They are not entirely like the plant, but since they have an ability to making their own food, they photosynthesize, so they are the plant-like, so we place them into the protoctist. At some point, you people may have suffered from the malaria, and the thing that clicks in our mind is that it is caused by a mosquito. But we don't have to blame the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes, they are just transferring the causative agent of the malaria, and that is a plasmodium. That again is a protoctist. Now, this is not entirely like the animal, but has got the features like animal. So these are animal-like organisms. Now, we don't entirely place them into the kingdom Animalia, but as of the protoctist as a distant kingdom, so we place them here. So here we are done with bacteria, with the fungus, and with the protoctist. And in the next class, we're going to look on toward the specialized cells in the animals and the specialized cells in the plants. So see you guys for the next class. Take care.